I want you to think back to the last time you checked your bank account and felt actual dread. Not mild concern, dread. That specific feeling where the number on the screen is lower than you expected and your brain immediately starts running calculations. How many days until payday? What bills are hitting this week? Whether that check engine light can wait one more month. Now I want you to imagine checking that same account and seeing $10,000. Not a million, not six figures, just $10,000 sitting there, not allocated to anything, not earmarked for a bill that's due next Friday, just present. The feeling isn't just relief, something deeper shifts. And once you understand exactly what that shift is, psychologically, mathematically, and in terms of how your entire life actually operates, you will never think about that number the same way again.
Because $10,000 isn't just money. It's the first real threshold between a financial life that controls you and one that you control. My name's Eric, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, wealth psychology, and the specific moments where people's relationship with money fundamentally changes. If you've ever wondered what it actually feels like to have a financial foundation, and more importantly, what it does to every other area of your life, hit subscribe and give this a thumbs up, because today we're going all the way in on $10,000. Before we talk about what changes at $10,000, we need to talk about what your brain is doing when you have nothing saved, because understanding the starting point is what makes the transformation make sense. When you're living paycheck to paycheck with no financial buffer, your brain operates in what psychologists call a scarcity mindset. And this isn't just a metaphor or a motivational concept. It's a measurable cognitive state with real consequences for how you think, decide, and perform. Research published in the journal Science found that financial scarcity consumes cognitive bandwidth the same way a demanding task does, meaning that when your brain is preoccupied with financial stress, you have measurably less mental capacity available for everything else.
Problem solving, long-term planning, impulse control. All of it gets degraded, not because you're less intelligent, because your brain is already running a constant background process called how do I survive until next paycheck? And that process takes up space. Here's what that looks like in practice. You take the first job offer that comes along because you can't afford to negotiate. You stay in situations that aren't good for you because leaving feels too risky. You say yes to things you don't want to do because you need the money. You miss opportunities you can clearly see because you don't have the cash to act on them. This isn't weakness. This is scarcity doing exactly what the research says it does, narrowing your focus to the immediate threat and shutting out everything beyond it.
Research from Vanguard reinforces this from the financial side specifically. Having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases financial well-being scores by 21%. $2,000. That's not a vacation, that's not a new phone. That's $2,000 doing nothing except sitting there. And it produces a 21% measurable improvement in how people feel about their entire financial life. Now imagine what 5 times that amount does. Here's where I want to be specific, because everything changes is not useful advice. Let's talk about what actually changes, concretely, category by category.
The first thing that changes is your relationship with emergencies. Right now, if you have no savings, every unexpected expense is a crisis. Your car needs $800 in repairs? That's a crisis. Your kid gets sick and the copay is $200. That's a crisis. Your landlord raises your rent and you need first and last month's deposit somewhere? That's a crisis. Every one of these events forces you into a reactive, costly, often debt-generating response. You put it on a credit card at 22% interest. You borrow from someone. You drain the little bit you had saved for something else.
When you have $10,000 sitting in a savings account, none of those events are crises anymore. They're inconveniences. The $800 car repair is annoying. It's not catastrophic. The $200 copay barely registers. The rent increase prompts a conversation, not a panic spiral. The number isn't large enough to make you rich. It's large enough to make normal life feel manageable instead of constantly precarious. And that shift from crisis mode to inconvenience mode frees up an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy that was previously consumed by financial anxiety.
The second thing that changes is how you show up at work. This one surprises people, but the data on it is real.
When you have no financial cushion, you are negotiating from pure desperation in every professional interaction you have. Your employer knows, even if they don't consciously articulate it, that you need this paycheck. You know it too, and it affects everything. How you respond to unreasonable requests, whether you ask for the raise you've earned, whether you push back on a situation that isn't right, whether you explore better opportunities that would require you to take a brief financial risk. $10,000 changes the dynamic completely. It gives you what I call a 2-month window, enough savings to walk away from a situation that isn't right and survive while you find something better. You probably won't use it, but knowing it's there changes your entire posture. You negotiate differently. You carry yourself differently. People respond to that shift in ways you can't always trace directly, but that consistently show up as better assignments, more recognition, and more money over time.
The third thing that changes is your ability to see opportunity. When you're living with nothing saved, opportunities don't disappear. They become things you watch happen to other people. A friend starts a business and mentions they're looking for a small investor. You hear about a certification that could raise your earning potential by $15,000 a year, but costs $2,000 up front. A flight deal appears for a networking conference that could change the trajectory of your career. Before $10,000, none of these are real options for you. They're things you nod at and move past, quietly.
After $10,000, these same situations have a different quality. You don't have to say yes to any of them, but you can actually evaluate them instead of automatically ruling them out. The certification becomes a genuine question of ROI instead of an impossible dream. The investment becomes something you can consider instead of something you can only admire from a distance. Options create opportunities, and $10,000 is the first real point where options become real.
Here's the piece that almost never gets talked about in personal finance content, and I think it might actually be the most important thing that happens when you save your first $10,000. You become a different type of person, not in a self-help abstract way, in a very specific behavioral way. Because getting to $10,000 from zero, without a windfall, without an inheritance, without suddenly making a lot more money, requires something that most people have never actually required of themselves financially before. It requires months of consistently choosing future security over present comfort, saying no to things you wanted, saying yes to delayed gratification over and over again, when the culture around you is designed to make immediate spending feel completely normal.
When you complete that process, something shifts in how you see yourself with money. You stop being someone who meant to save but never quite got there. You became someone who actually did it. And that identity change, quiet, internal, not visible to anyone else, affects every financial decision you make going forward. When the next opportunity to save comes up, your default answer is different. When the next shiny purchase tries to claim your savings, your resistance is different. The habit has been built. The proof of concept has been demonstrated to yourself, about yourself. That's worth more than the $10,000.
Let's talk about what $10,000 actually does mathematically, because the psychological shifts are real, but the compounding math is what makes this milestone matter beyond the mindset. $10,000 invested in a broad market index fund, earning a historical average of 7% annually, becomes approximately $20,000 in 10 years without a single additional dollar contributed. It doubles. Purely through time and compounding, your $10,000 in your early 30s becomes $20,000 before you turn 45, and that's assuming you never add another cent. But here's the number that really illustrates why the first $10,000 is the hardest part and not the last part.
If you're saving $400 a month and earning 7% on your growing balance, your first $10,000 takes roughly 24 months to accumulate. Your second $10,000 takes about 20 months. Your third takes 17. By the time you're working toward your fifth $10,000, you're at roughly 13 months because your existing balance is generating returns that work alongside your monthly contributions. The boulder analogy is real. The first $10,000 is the hardest push. Everything after it benefits from the momentum of everything before it, but nothing accelerates until that first threshold is crossed. Which means the time cost of procrastinating on saving your first $10,000 is not just the value of that $10,000, it's the compounding on everything that would have followed it. And that number, over a 30-year timeline, is not $10,000. It's the difference between financial security and financial anxiety for the rest of your life. Here's one more thing that changes at $10,000 that nobody talks about enough. Your daily mental load drops significantly. When you have nothing saved, you're making financial calculations constantly. Can I afford this? Should I buy the generic brand? Is it worth getting the oil change now or pushing it another month? Each of these decisions burns a small amount of cognitive energy. Multiply that by dozens of micro decisions every single day, and by the end of the week, you're exhausted from just managing the math of your own life. $10,000 doesn't eliminate financial decisions, but it eliminates the survival level calculations that dominate the daily experience of living without a buffer. You stop calculating whether you can afford the brand name cereal. You stop doing math on whether the $35 school field trip is survivable this week. You stop lying awake at 2 a.m. running worst-case scenarios about what happens if something breaks. That freed-up mental energy goes somewhere, and almost universally, it goes toward thinking about growth instead of survival. Better moves at work, bigger ideas, longer time horizons, more intentional decisions about money, career, and life. The $10,000 doesn't just sit in your account. It actively improves the quality of your thinking.
Here's the truth about $10,000. It won't make you rich. It won't let you quit your job or retire early or buy a house tomorrow. In the context of a full financial life, $10,000 is a beginning, not an arrival. But it is the specific beginning that changes everything else. It changes how your brain operates under stress. It changes how you negotiate at work. It changes which opportunities you can actually pursue. It changes your identity as someone who manages money. It changes the compounding math that drives every financial milestone that comes after it. The distance between zero saved and $10,000 saved is not just $10,000. It's the distance between a financial life that happens to you and one that you actually build on purpose. And once you cross it, you wonder why it took you so long to start.